thank all of you for gracing this occasion. It's a very important occasion for us, especially those that are part of the Gwala Foundation. We want to thank those that have accepted. A very hot NC, if what you are reading in the newspapers is something to go by. The family of Comrade Mzala, and thank you for agreeing part of this event. I'm going to formally ask Comrade Mahlengi Bengu, someone that I've worked with in various capacities, mainly in the student movement, the youth movement, government, to formally come and do the welcoming. She represents the OR Tambo School of Leadership, and immediately after that I will introduce Comrade Jeff Hadeb, somebody also that I worked very closely with during my young days. Comrade Mahling, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Panyaza, the chair of the Gwala Foundation. I've already introduced, and mine is the simplest assignment. We are here to memorialize Comrade Mzala, and we are here to ensure that, in fact, the struggle against the erasure of various contributions, historic contributions, by many of us stalwarts in our struggle doesn't happen. And to keep that name alive, but more than anything, to keep the lessons alive. This year, the OR Tambo School of Leadership is accelerating its efforts to build the relationship with Gwala Foundation. And this follows the successful hosting of a joint memorial lecture in 2020, which was to mark 20 years since the passing away of Mzala. This relationship is part of the school's broader program of forging value-add collaborations and partnerships which amplify its primary interests in the advancement of political education in our society and within our movement and the wider democratic movement. Specifically in 2021, the joint memorial lecture will mark the 30 years since the passing of Comrade Jabulani, Nobleman, Mzala, Nxumalo. I won't bore you with details regarding the well-recorded and the well-known history of Comrade Nxumalo, because I am certain that our main speaker will do justice even better than I could possibly do. I want to go on to say that the OR Tambo School of Leadership does welcome the opportunity to continue to forge these relationships by actively disseminating political education content that is ultimately intended to renew the entire mass democratic movement in society. Since its formation, the OR Tambo School was formed and launched in the year 2019. Since its formation, the school has been engaged in forging mutually beneficial relationships that we hope will assist to amplify our agenda of facilitating the growth of cadres who have a critical understanding of how the world works and also have the necessary tools to understand how to change the world. It is this agenda that necessitated our participation in today's program, and we're extremely grateful, Comrade Panyaza, and to the entire team for the kind of collegiality that's been happening, and we hope this should be happening into the future. And whilst the occasion is one of a memorial lecture and could be mistakenly understood as merely historic in outlook, it is our view that the person being commemorated, which is Comrade Mzala Nxumalo, is an embodiment of lessons needed to be learned, cherished, and brought to life today within our organization, the ANC, its leads, and the broader mass democratic movement and society. And I think we can say that these lessons that Mzala embodies and embodied have never been so
I
needed
use that
in terms
and
of
I put it on
the current state of the nation and the
but
current state
this
of
behind,
our
because I
mother
was
organization, the
also
African National
because
Congress. So I think this is very timely. A reading of his history from his school days and well into exile speaks to selfless service, speaks to servant leadership, which was underpinned by a strong sense of dedication, discipline, and resolve. And I just wanted to say that, in fact, for us as the Tambo School of Leadership, and I think all of the cadres that are still committed to changing the social order, it also lessons from Comrade Mzala speaks to the importance of intellectual work. And for me, that is always a takeaway whenever I read material in Nxumalo about how we've all been impacted by Comrade Mzala as young people, as student activists growing up, even now, because we are still activists. So I wanted to just really stress this thing about the criticality of intellectual work, and which is waning. And of course, not intellectual work that is divorced from practical struggles and practical work on the ground. Appreciating where we find ourselves today, it becomes important for the content of our political education and our discourse in general to reflect on what is the spirit of these gallant leaders like Comrade Mzala, and most importantly, how to keep it alive in the ways we unfold our own experience. I would like to then conclude by saying that it is our contention that leaders who are cadres with a well-rounded worldview will produce and implement world-class solutions. In our country's case, this would mean finding sustainable solutions to our myriad challenges, and by demonstrating how a cadre like Mzala represented such acumen, we will be offering ourselves moment of reflection on our respective roles in society. And of course, part of that ongoing reflection will be happening today as we seek to memorialize Comrade Mzala and those that worked with him, and as we seek to also stop the erasure of various contributions of people in our struggle for democracy and in our struggle for a new and a just social order. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Comrade Mahlengi, and thank you so much for really cementing that relationship between ourselves as a foundation as well as the OR Tambo School of Leadership. Comrade, almost 30 years ago, Comrade Jabulani Nobleman Nxumalo, who was fondly known as Comrade Mzala, departed from the world of the living. He died tragically at the young age of 35 years in exile. He was one of the sharpest and brilliant theoreticians ever to be produced by the ANC-SACP-led alliance. His death in exile robbed us and robbed our liberation movement of an upright, principled, independent, uncompromising voice, a rebel thinker, but most importantly, an amazing writer. Comrade Mzala was an uncompromising communist and dependable ally of the late Comrade Gwala. We are remembering Comrade Mzala today, not to lament nor invoke his resting corpse, but to draw inspiration from his revolutionary ideas and teachings as a response to the persisting challenges faced by the people of our country, but most importantly, our movement. Today, as we remember this paragon of political correctness and leadership virtue, we call upon Comrade Mzalas of today to have a revolutionary duty to restore people's confidence to the ANC and its alliance structures. Mzalas of today must possess the high level of political maturity, ideological clarity, upright, and be incorruptible. It is within this context that we take this opportunity in memory of Comrade Mzala, that we call upon the cessation of hostilities amongst our leaders, The squabbles are too much, the divisions unbearable. Our divisions and fights are not taking us anywhere as a movement. Our inability to resolve our differences are betraying the many generations that came before us that laid their lives for us to be free to. We call upon all our leaders to put our people first, but most importantly, to protect our movement. Comrade Mzala's intellectual work acted as an organizer and mobilizer during difficult period in our struggle. His work inspired many activists in the underground inside the country to advance the cause of liberation struggle as it was led by the ANC-SACP alliance at that time. It was not by accident that those who collaborated with the regime saw Comrade Mzala as a threat, because his ideals for a truly non-racial, non-sexist and democratic South Africa cannot stand. I had the honor to be part of the reception committee that welcomed this comrade, who will address now, when he was released from Robben Island while I was a student at the then University of Natal Durban campus. Actually, my first membership card of the SACP Central, Durban Central, still bears his signature. Comrades and revolutionaries, allow me to call upon Comrade Jeff Tamsanga Khatebe, a tried and tested cadre of our movement, a product of the 1976 detachment that swelled the ranks of Umkhonto weSizwe along with Comrade Mzala, a great graduate of the Lenin School in the former Soviet Union, an intellectual in his own right, a former Robben Islander, an Umkhambani decorated son, to deliver a lecture in honor of Comrade Mzala Nxumalo, who lies buried in Engoye, KwaZulu-Natal. Comrade Jeff, thank you so much for agreeing to address us. Thank you.
Allow me firstly to express my profound gratitude at the opportunity to partake in reflecting on one of the most outstanding sons of the soil, a fighter, an organic intellectual, and a fearless revolutionary. Last 22nd of February this year marked 30 years since his untimely departure at the young age of 35. But I want also to take this opportunity to thank the Bishop of the Harry Gwala Foundation, Comrade Panyaza Lesufi, as well as the Principal of O.R. Tambo School of Leadership, Comrade David Masonlo, as well as Comrade Mahlengi Bengu, one of the directors of the O.R. Tambo School of Leadership. I also want to acknowledge the sister of our departed comrade, Comrade Titi Nxumalo. I'm very glad that the Harry Gwala Foundation has helped organize this lecture. Harry Gwala remains one of the bravest, most outstanding, and sharpest political minds I met early in my political activism. My first personal interaction with Isitwalandwe Siaparankwe, Comrade Harry Gwala, was in 1976 when he was facing high treason charges in Pietermaritzburg for fighting against the obnoxious system of apartheid. At that time, I was an article clerk at the Archigumede and Phyllis Naidu firm of attorneys in Durban that represented political prisoners and those awaiting trial. Those Pietermaritzburg 10, led by Harry Gwala, were giants on whose broad shoulders we could stand tall and reach higher goals of our revolutionary agenda. Before proceeding on this conversation about Comrade Mzala, allow me to solemnly express and echo sadness suffered by the Zulu royal family and the people at large on the passing of uhlanga lomhlabathi isilo samabandla Goodwill Zwelithini kaBheki Zulu. His reign took place during some of the most difficult times in our history, leading to the dawn of our new democratic order in 1994. As we continue to mourn his passing, we are comforted in that uyibekile induku ebandla. His legacy shall live on the lived experiences of all our people. I wish the royal family well during these trying times as they forge ahead into a new era without what was undoubtedly their pillar of strength for almost 50 years. I must also add that we also mourn the passing on of President of Tanzania, His Excellency President John Magufuli. Many will recall that it was to receive some of the greatest solidarity assistance, a country to which Comrade Mzala was deported to after one of his arrests in Swaziland. Tanzania was for many years the headquarters of the ANC in exile. That country was very pivotal in the struggle against apartheid by providing material assistance and support to our movement and a second home to countless activists who were exiled by the apartheid regime. Still on Swaziland, for the purposes of our conversation today, I will refer to Eswatini as Swaziland, in as much as I will refer to KwaZulu-Natal as simply Natal, as both were called during the times and life of Comrade Mzala. We are also acutely aware that the COVID-19 pandemic has left many families bereaved. Ministers, members of parliament, MECs, government officials, artists, actors, actresses, leaders of business, churches, NGOs, unions, and ordinary family members, both here and abroad. I'm very confident that as a South African nation and as the whole humanity will forge ahead to conquer this invisible enemy. The storyline of Comrade Mzala, as we fondly knew him, reads like the many stories of countless other freedom fighters whose personal contact with injustice awakened within them the fearless fighting spirit of their forebears. They did not relent on fighting to defeat oppression visited on them and their generation. In Comrade Mzala was evident the fearless fighting spirit of brave kings, queens, and warriors who resisted colonial conquest. It was the same fighting spirit as of the founding leaders of the African National Congress in 1912, and the various generations of heroes and heroines who perished in the intervening period between our colonial conquest and our political liberation in 1994. They valiantly fought against colonialism and country, a democratic constitutional state. Their legacy is what must continue to spur us on to realize the ideals of equality, the ideals of prosperity across race, gender, ethnicity, and class. Perhaps very relevant in today's theme, the world we want, time for change. This conversation reminds and demands of us to take up Mzala's fighting spear beyond political freedom to attain the kind of world anticipated by the ANC in 1912, the Freedom Charter, and many generations thereafter who sacrificed their lives so that we could be free. Writing in 1985, at the height of the protest that started here in the Transvaal, in the Vaal region, In his treatise, Cooking the Rice Inside the Pot, Comrade Mzala said, "The democratic movement that has developed in the heart of our country is a powerful testimony of our people's unwillingness to accept reforms of the system. Our people have long ago discovered that what is needed in South Africa is a new society, a new political and economic system, a radical change of all that is existing." In celebrating, therefore, his legacy and commemorating his untimely demise in 1991, we should be interrogating the pertinent question on whether or not we are on course, on the world we want, and if we are indeed effecting the radical changes consistent with the national democratic revolution leading to the national democratic society. Comrade Mzala was a tireless cadre who fought till his last breath. We too cannot afford to rest on our laurels when the objective conditions of the world he and many others fought for has not yet been fully achieved. Born in Dundee on the 22nd of October in 1955, to parents that were both school teachers, Baba Benjamin and Mama Elsie, Comrade Mzala was encouraged from a very early age to read books, and in this way developed the nascent inquisitive mind that was later molded him into a well-accomplished and dynamic organic intellectual, prolific writer, and a fearless revolutionary. It was this inquisitive mind, cultivated from reading books as encouraged by his parents, that nurtured the political rebel in him to fight against all forms of injustice. Consequently, at the mere tender age of 17, in 1972, he was expelled from school for leading a school boycott. By the time he enrolled to study law at the University of Zululand, Ongoy, he was increasingly finding his maturing political ideological trajectory. It is in tracing this ideological development over the lived experiences wherein he observed first-hand injustice suffered by his people that he developed his political and ideological views. At Ngoye, he joined SASO, the South African Student Organization. He was later expelled for political activities associated with the 1976 student uprisings that started not far from here in Soweto and quickly spread throughout the country like a runaway fire. Like thousands of other youths such as Solomon Kalushi Mahlangu, Comrade Mzala skipped the country to join the underground struggle waged by the ANC in exile. This was after the state heightened its repression in the aftermath of the 1976 student uprising. He received military training in Angola and distinguished himself as a fearless soldier of Umkhonto weSizwe. He was part of the June 16 detachment of MK. He was tragically shot, though accidentally, by a new MK recruit at the Funda MK military camp north of Luanda in Angola during training. When everyone thought the shot was fatal, he nonetheless reawakened after admission at the local hospital. He completely recovered from those near-fatal facial gunshot wounds and was not deterred from spreading and spearheading the struggle for liberation. He further received training in the Soviet Union and the German Democratic Republic, the GDR. In his political training, he distinguished himself with his sharp acumen to comprehend complex theoretical and political issues. Comrade Mzala served during the struggle mainly in Angola and Swaziland. It was in Swaziland that he was to infiltrate at his own accord Northern Natal. He spearheaded in Northern Natal mass mobilization, which became fertile ground for the consolidation of Operation Vula later. In Northern Natal, in a place called Ingwavu, he established an MK unit in line with his viewpoint that the masses must be armed to liberate themselves from the yoke of apartheid. Comrade Mzala, like many MK soldiers in exile, lived like inyamazan, perpetually being hunted by the apartheid regime. Consequently, he had to live under various disguises. That is why many cadres were known only through their pseudonyms. Comrade Mzala used various of such pseudonyms, both as a military combatant and as a prolific writer. Some of such names were Nxumalo Mihwe, Jabulani Nxumalo, Alex Mashinini, Jabulani Dlamini, and Jabulani Mkhatshwa, the latter being Isithakazelo sakwaNxumalo. The frontline states at the time, which were initially havens for armed struggle bases, were routinely attacked after the Komati Accord between South Africa and Mozambique. Other secret accords were signed in 1982, including with Swaziland, where he was based. This made living and operating in those areas dangerous. Hence, combatants such as Comrade Mzala were constantly on the move and in disguise to evade arrest. Many will recall that the apartheid regime will undertake illegal military raids into Mozambique, undermining the sovereign statehood of the countries. This resulted in the killing of many comrades in Matola in Mozambique, as well as in Lesotho and Botswana, where many comrades paid the ultimate price. Many comrades and leaders such as Chris Hani escaped such raids by a whisker, but still innocent lives would be lost in many instances. Those were perilous days when partaking in the struggle was tantamount to signing your own death certificate. Against all those odds, Comrade Mzala was fearless and adamant that the liberation of our country could be at best be attained through armed struggle. In the struggle, NK will occupy the role of vanguard of the armed struggle and the masses of the people as the ultimate dependable motive force to overthrow the racist regime. It was this thesis that he advanced in his treatise, Cooking the Rice Inside the Pot. It was in this context of his analysis of the struggle that he penned many articles in Sichaba, in the Dawn, and the African Communist. Cooking the Rice Inside the Pot was an argument in favor of a mass-based armed struggle and popular insurrection against the apartheid regime within the borders of South Africa, or what he called the Pot. Comrade Mzala believed that whilst MK was key in the armed struggle, the masses of the people were indispensable for the ultimate victory against the apartheid regime. In that article, he argued for the arming of the masses of the people as the pressure cooker that will result in rice being cooked faster. Let me just quote. Such a condition, he said, requires political and military victory by the organized masses, the only condition that will clear the ground for the implementation of the Freedom Charter. A mass movement is essential for the revolution. Great social objectives in history have been accomplished by mass movements. Our revolution in South Africa can be victorious only when it mobilizes and organizes the masses at the grassroots levels. It can be invincible force only when it is an offshoot of the embattled workers, rural toilers, and other democratic forces. the decisive role of the masses in revolution cannot be substituted by an elite core of professional revolutionaries. We seek to establish the power of the people and not of the vanguard movement, close quotes. From this, we can decipher that Comrade Mzala believed that the masses were not an appendix, but at the core of the struggle, without which the struggle could not succeed. He would be appalled, therefore, by the social distance between those who lead and those who are ordinary members of the movement. We must not only be Comrade Mzala during the door-to-door voter mobilization, Comrade Banyaza, but we must continuously maintain contact that will inspire the accelerated resolution of the socio-economic challenges that our people are facing. That is why I come back to his treatise, Cooking the Rice Inside the Pot, where he said, we often meet people who imagine that when we talk of the working people swelling the ranks of our movement, we are referring to the exile structures of our organization. This is incorrect thinking. Leadership, in the final analysis, means going to the masses, merging with them into an invincible fighting force. History's great call to our movement, headed by the ANC, is to begin a process of de-exiling ourselves, of transferring the initiative of the liberation process to the actual arena of our struggle inside South Africa. We must fight our way back into our country. We must find a way of dispatching units of our political and military leadership to the various pockets of mass resistance inside South Africa, close quotes. And in order to further validate this concept, wherein the masses of the people must be at the center of the struggle, cooking rice inside the pot, he quoted the legendary Che Guevara when he said, guerrilla warfare is not, as is often thought, a small-scale war, a war conducted by a minority grouping against a powerful army. No, guerrilla warfare is war by the entire people against the reigning oppression. The guerrilla movement is their armed vanguard. The guerrilla army comprises all the people of a region and a country. That is the reason for its strength and for its eventual victory of whomsoever power tries to crush it. That is the base and grounding of the guerrilla is the people. As I've already indicated, Comrade Mzala's stay in Swaziland was not without peril. Under the disguise of a journalist, he worked for the Swazi Observer newspaper as a reporter under the pseudonym Jabulani Dlamini. He had a motorbike of which legend has it that its tank could be filled with a mere 5 rand. He also lived a very simple and nomadic life, forever looking over his shoulders for the threat of a possible arrest or even assassination. He would drive around sporting a pipe in his mouth to further disguise his identity, even though he was not a smoker. Comrade Mzala was arrested in 1983 by the Swazi police and deported back to Mozambique, only to return under a different pseudonym. This was after the 1982 secret accord between apartheid regime and the Swazi government on flushing out all ANC cadres from that country. Still in 1983, I subsequently personally met with him in Maputo at a Polkal underground unit led by the late Comrade Shadrach Maphumulo. Comrade Shadrach Maphumulo was later assassinated by the apartheid regime in Swaziland in 1988. Even at that stage, when I met Comrade Mzala in 1983 in Maputo, his sharp, critical, and inquisitive mind was ever self-evident. He was interested in the Polkal reading material that I had with me which was written in German. His critical mind was always thirsty for more knowledge. After his 1983 arrest and deportation to Mozambique, the relentless and fearless Mzala returned the same year in December and stayed in the southern part of Swaziland at the Shiselweni district. The advantage of Shiselweni district was its close proximity to northern Natal, where he was to later establish political links as a political commissar. His luck, however, ran out again as he was rearrested by the Swazi police the following year in 1984 and deported this time to faraway Tanzania. It was in Tanzania where he worked for Radio Freedom and Amandla Cultural Ensemble. He was subsequently deployed in Prague in Czechoslovakia, now called Czech Republic, as an SACP representative on the editorial board of the World Marxist Review. Comrade Mzala had taken over this position from Comrade Essop Pahad, who in turn had taken it over from Comrade Michael Hamel. As editor of the African Communist, Michael Hamel had written way back in 1959 in the first edition of the African Communist that Africa needs a communist thought as dry and thirsty soil needs rain. Marxism-Leninism was the undisputed world ideological outlook for most revolutionary fighters across the globe, and in particular the ANC and its tripartite allies. I'm very confident that had he not passed on, like Brian Bunting, our late veteran, and the current SSCP veteran Essop Pahad, would also attest that this distinguished thinker of note would have been a member of the South African Communist Party Central Committee and an editor of the African Communist. After taking ill, he was subsequently transferred to London for medical treatment in 1987. It was in London he was to spend the latter days of his life. Even though his health had deteriorated, he continued to tirelessly work for the liberation of South Africa from apartheid as part of the International Committee of the SACP. Whilst in London, he registered for his PhD degree at the University of Essex, but could not complete it due to ill health, leading to his ultimate demise on the 22nd February of 1991. This was almost a year after the unbanning of the political organization and the release of President Nelson Mandela in 1990. Like the biblical Moses, and as history would have it later with O.R. Tambo and Chris Hani, he saw the promised land but could not occupy it. Negotiations for a post-apartheid South Africa had become a reality at the time of his demise, and the hopes for a new South Africa in the horizon were very high. The year preceding his demise in December 1990, the ANC held its National Consultative Conference in Nasrec, for which he was nominated to attend as an ANC representative from the London region, but could not do so because of ill health. In 2010, Comrade Mzala Nxumalo was awarded by former President Zuma an Order of Luthuli in silver posthumously for his outstanding contribution to the liberation struggle against apartheid. Often the case, when we reminisce about the history of our struggle and the iconic leaders who led it, we sometimes merely do so to regale ourselves with our individual and collective heroism, but to reflect on how that part of history has bearing on contemporary challenges. It is therefore not uncommon for people to wonder what this or that leader would have said or done in contemporary South Africa had they been alive. Comrade Mzala is one such departed leader whose wisdom has been sorely missed during this period of a democratic transition. It is in this context that Mzala obliges us through his legacy as individual cadres, as well as a movement, to tirelessly advance the vision of a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, equal, more particularly prosperous society. Mzala was opposed to reform in favor of total liberation. He asserted that the oppressed people definitely reject as unworthy of them any petty and ill-fated freedom handed out by the oppressors. They are prepared to forsake immediate petty political gains and reformist handouts in the belief that they are part of a victorious revolution. I can therefore say without any fear of contradiction that while appreciating the urgency of resolving the problem of poverty through social grants, Comrade Mzala would have urged us to move beyond that. He would have argued this so that the people can earn their living through economic opportunities such as decent jobs and entrepreneurships. He would have argued this not as a way of assimilating blacks into the white-owned economy, but as a basis to fundamentally restructure the economy to reflect the demographics of race and gender and restore the dignity of all our people. In such an argument, bulging the middle class would have been in line with eradicating poverty, as it is with many advanced economies. His argument would have probably been that the middle class must not be one that is highly indebted to financial institutions, rendering it a false claim their redemption from poverty. Of course, Mzala would have deeply appreciated the eventualities of the negotiated settlement. However, he would have most probably not settled on the political breakthrough of 1994 as a permanent state of affairs. Comrade Mzala would not only have accepted that the problem of the South African economy is that of racial inequality and monopoly capital, but would have also propounded on how to undo the structural defects of the economy that continue to cast barrier to the participation by the majority of South Africans. For the ardent Marxist that he was, he would have reminded us of Karl Marx's assertion that philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. I'm confident that he would have further said, our task is very simple. Implement ANC National Conference resolutions on both organizational and government transformation programs. On such an occasion, we invoke the name of Mzala because when we entombed his mortal remains, like in many similar occasions on the demise of our fellow revolutionaries, we defiantly proclaimed that his spirit will live forever. It is in this context that we celebrate him not as Idlozi, but as a profound intellectual and a revolutionary whose legacy history demands we must emulate. So today, in the spirit of Mzala, we are obliged by his record of struggle, his legacy, to critically look into the theoretical, political, intellectual, and ideological basis for the various challenges we have both as a movement as well as a ruling party in power. Comrade Mzala was a man with a passion, with a mission. Armed with his religious Christian beliefs and background, he began early in his teens to fight against injustice at schools and at university. Perhaps we should pose the question on what Mzala would have thought of our education system, if indeed it prepares the kind of a generation that must take over the reins of the country in every sphere of our body politic. Mzala would have insisted, based on his own experience as a young activist, that inkunzi isemathole. Comrade Mzala was an organic intellectual, groomed into progressive ideological worldview by personal experiences in observing conflicts occasioned by societal and state-orchestrated injustices. His main passion was undoubtedly on building a just and democratic state that unites all South Africa's people against racial, gender, class, and ethnic prejudices that was engineered by colonialism and perfected by the apartheid regime. To him, the national question was paramount. In order to navigate these various challenges visited on the masses of the people, Comrade Mzala embraced the prism of Marxism-Leninism as tools of analysis. Historical and dialectical materialism were his main instruments of analysis. He lived to Che Guevara's mantra that the true revolutionary is guided by great feelings of love. It is impossible to think of a genuine revolutionary lacking this quality. Armed with historical and dialectical materialism, Comrade Mzala sought theoretical resolution of the contradictions he observed in society as a basis for their practical resolution. He did not blame others when he saw a problem, but would rather delve into resolving it as he did out of his own volition when he launched an MK unit in Ngwavu. Of course, he did not dive into an unknown stream head-on first, but first measured his depth through his profound analytical abilities. Comrade Nxumalo teaches us that we must eliminate regrets by not thumb-sucking political, economic, and social solutions, but by consistently applying a scientific approach to analysis. There are many topical issues that we could attend to as a tribute to Comrade Mzala. It is a pity that many of his writings are not easily accessible online, as are the many writings of other leading icons of our struggle for liberation. It will be important that as the ANC, we attend urgently to the issue of our online archives, lest we live in the continuous present like some other animal species without consciousness, neither of history nor of the future. We do know that there is the Nxumalo Center for the Study of the South African Society in Pietermaritzburg. The center's work must arguably be profiled more to encourage, amongst others, readership by our youth into its role in our struggle for freedom and democracy. Surely, that center must also be helped to acquire all his writings if needs be. This will be for the preservation and accessibility to all researchers. One of its young researchers, Percy Ngonyama, whose PhD thesis was on Mzala Nxumalo at the University of Natal, was also a member of the center. He wrote a biography on Comrade Mzala, but unfortunately died just after completing his works on the subject in February 2019. In his tribute to the late Percy Ngonyama, the CEO of the Mzala Nxumalo Center, Derek Buchla, undertook to publish the biography works on Nxumalo into a book. Apart from the lessons we derive from his lived example, we have a duty to continuously honor him so that the youth of today must know that freedom was not free. Comrade Mzala lived the struggle to his last day, when he could have chosen to betray it and become anything else other than a revolutionary. To see injustice at schools, universities, government institutions, the private sector, NGOs, the workplace, at homes and anywhere, and not act against it is to betray the cause of justice. It is to betray Comrade Mzala. Likewise, to fail to fearlessly and selflessly advance the struggle for the National Democratic Society through a well-oiled organizational material of the ANC, it is to betray Comrade Mzala. It is a betrayal of Comrade Mzala when we fail to intellectually arm our youth to the extent that their organization, the ANC Youth League, is in perpetual limbo, unable to even convene their National Congress. I'm glad that this weekend at the NEC we're on course in ensuring a national task team that hopefully will ensure that the ANC Youth League National Congress is urgently convened. If we were to speak of multiplying Comrade Mzala, there is no better place than the ANC Youth League, the Young Communist League, SASCO, and COSAS. To borrow from Michael Hamel, the youth needs communist thought, just like the dry and thirsty soil needs rain to help grow any vegetation. To be a factionalist is to betray the objective and scientific approach of Comrade Mzala. Comrade Mzala would not have stopped at decrying or lamenting the status quo, but would have provided intellectual clarity no matter the magnitude or complexity of the challenges at hand. To be despondent in the face of adversity of challenges is to betray the never die spirit of Comrade Mzala. Comrade Mzala is not merely nominally attributed as an intellectual of note, but among others because of his pedigree in the trenches of intellectual struggle. In appraising the Freedom Charter as the ideological pathway of our struggle and the future democratic South Africa, he was acutely aware that the Charter itself was not a socialist document. He believed it was about the revolutionary and fundamental transformation of South African society. He could therefore defend purposely the radical posture of the Freedom Charter against counterclaims of the Azania Manifesto arising from the National Forum, purporting to be an alternative to the Freedom Charter. He knew that by the envisaged democracy was not necessarily meant socialism on the onset, but the defeat of apartheid and the installation of the will of the people. As a Marxist, he believed in the agency of both the vanguard as the core leadership and the masses of the people as the ultimate motive force for change to usher in the kind of world we want. In this, he would have lauded the NGC resolutions in Port Elizabeth in 2000 in defining the motive force for change as essentially those who stand to benefit from the revolution. He would have argued that the structure of the economy can only be transformed by the masses of the people through their own agency as motive force for change. Comrade Mzala was both a member of the ANC and SACP, and I'm confident had he been a worker in South Africa today, he would have been a member of COSATU also. That is why he envied those struggling within the country in his cooking the rice inside the pot 3 times. Unity of purpose was very important to him, and factionalism and disunity would have pained him greatly. Of course, we do not seek to put words in the mouth of the dead, but his lived experience presents the pattern from which we draw profound lessons of the political and economic tasks at hand. By invoking his name, we are in fact analyzing the present in his memory. Yet in the interest of the current generation, his radical posture would have resonated very well with the 2012 ANC National Conference resolution on the agency of the second phase of our democratic transition to be characterized by a radical socio-economic transformation. To him, the rice must be cooked inside the pot, meaning that the contradictions must be sharpened internally to the point where the oppressor relents on the will of the masses politically and economically. In doing so, the ANC can never succeed if it fails to march in one step and in tandem with the masses of the people. As a member of the SACP Mzala, we must say that the SACP should continuously interrogate the trajectory towards socialism, as it did with the South African Road to Socialism in 1962 and the political program of the SACP 2012 to 2017 at the 13th National Congress. It would be a disservice to truth if we were not to mention that against the odds of all the challenges we face and encountered since the advent of democracy, the ANC government has ensured that our country today is better than what it was in 1994. On areas of electrification, of human settlement, of road infrastructure, and other infrastructural programs, access to health, access to education, access to justice, social funds for the relief of those extremely poor, and many other initiatives, the ANC government has helped alleviate poverty either directly or indirectly through job creation. As we approach the national local government elections, there is no doubt in my mind that our clarion call must echo Comrade Mzala when he insisted that it is the masses of our people that will free themselves from the political and economic bondage. The ANC must at all times strive not to betray Mzala's clarion call on the masses to take their own socio-economic liberation upon themselves. Local government must enable popular economic participation at all localities. We must not betray the masses as they mandate us to live in local government transformation. Local government must remain our priority of ensuring we transform this economy to reflect the democratic aspirations of all our people as entailed in the African claims, in the Freedom Charter, in the RDP document, in the National Development Plan, and all ANC National Conference resolutions. I therefore urge you to celebrate Comrade Mzala both in word and in deed. As my parting shot, and on a lighter note, allow me to reflect on an incident that speaks to the resilience of Comrade Mzala. When his penned and published intellectualism received no counter critique or review, he had to write a rejoinder to his own cooking the rice inside the pot. He did so through another profound article, albeit under a different pseudonym, with the title, Preparing the Fire Before Cooking the Rice Inside the Pot. As a political commissar, he prepared the fire in Northern Natal amongst the masses of our people as he mobilized them into a formidable force against the apartheid regime prior to Operation Vula. I do hope that the OR Tambo School of Leadership, the Gwala Foundation, and other similar initiatives will help us have more Mzalas so that we have in every generation a vanguard of young, dynamic, critical, scientific analysts and leaders to further shape the content and the trajectory of our revolution. Amandla awethu. I thank you.
So, thank you so much, Comrade Jeff, for the informative and detailed presentation on Comrade Mzala. It literally went beyond our expectations. We really struggled to get some of the information that you have nicely captured and packaged. I hope the team will get the input so that we can also distribute it as widely as possible. I know we are joined by other members of the family as well as the family of Harry Gwala. Thank you so much for coming. We truly, truly and honestly appreciate your presence as always. Sister Nxumalo, we just want to hand over to you now and also get a message from the family. Thank you so much.
Comrade Jeff Hadebe, Comrade Panyaza Lisufi, Chair of the Harry Gwala Foundation, Comrade Mahlengi, representative of the OR Tambo School of Leadership, our most valued guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. I, on behalf of the Nxumalo family, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to all speakers and guests alike. A big thank you to you, Comrade Jeff, for the interactive memorial lecture to mark 30 years of the passing away of our dear brother and father, Jabulani, Nobleman, Mzala. Something that really struck me was when Comrade Jeff referred to how Mzala would have argued for us to move beyond social grants as the only solution of resolving problems of poverty. Mzala would have argued that we should create an environment that would allow people to have decent jobs and not assimilate blacks into the white-owned economy, but fundamentally structure the economy to reflect the demographics of race and gender and restore the dignity of all our people. Comrade Jeff, we are all inspired by your great work. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation to both the Harry Gwala Foundation and the school represented by Mahlengi for your efforts to recognize Mzala's contribution to the South African struggle. Further, we are grateful to you for the perfect logistical support and guidance in organizing this lecture. I also wish to express my gratitude to the South African Communist Party for taking time away from your busy schedules. This assembly would be impossible without your support. I may also like to express my sincere thanks, particularly to the story that Comrade Jeff referred to in most of his statement, referring to cooking the rice inside the pot, and how Comrade Zala even spoke about preparing fire before cooking the pot. And those were his intellectual arguments. But we have seen how he never ended there, but practically participated and was involved in the Natal machinery, where he mobilized the people of Northern Natal, specifically operating from the area of Ingwavuma. So he did exactly what Comrade Mahlengi referred to when she said that the intellectual work should not be divorced from practicality. So he did exactly the two without any failure. I would also like to express our gratefulness and to welcome the call for the unbanning of Mzala's book, The Chief with a Double Agenda, that Comrade Panyaza referred to. We thank you very much for the initiative. I cannot thank everyone enough, especially our guests and visitors, for their involvement and willingness to be part of this assembly. We thank you for being with us. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Comrades, that's it. I honestly want to thank everyone that has been part of this session and those that made it possible for us to be here. We always say, as long as you're still alive, Comrade Mzala will not die. And as long as there is still a need to truly see a truly non-racial, non-sexist and democratic South Africa, those ideals will make us to live forever. So, thank you so much. Unless if I've missed something, comrades, I really want to thank, as it was done by our ambassador, everyone that made it possible for us to be here. We are working very hard towards the 20th of June, when the gravesite of Comrade Gwala, which has already been declared a heritage site. So our next big project is to go there and officially unveil it, so that our children, our children's children will understand where lies a giant also of our revolutionary movement. So to all of you who have joined us, we really appreciate, and I hate prolonging things for purpose of prolonging them. So thank you so much. Thank you, and thanks for coming. Thank you.